As I'm in the midst of planning an upcoming solo trip to Vancouver Island, I'm reminded of an old military adage that my father used to say: time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. I heard that a lot growing up, and I have to say it stuck. When it comes to travel, a little advanced planning can make the difference between a smooth, enjoyable trip and one full of unexpected headaches. So today I'm taking you through the process of how I am planning my upcoming solo trip to Vancouver Island and the Canadian Rockies, how I chose where to go, how I booked flights, accommodations, and excursions, and some tips that you might find useful if you're planning a trip on your own. If you love travel, and especially if you're a solo traveler, stick around. Part of the fun of traveling for me is actually the planning process. Honestly, I usually start thinking about my next trip when I'm on the flight home from the last one. This time I knew that I wanted to stay in Canada. The Canadian dollar is weak against the US dollar and the euro, so it made sense financially. Plus, I have friends and family on Vancouver Island that I haven't seen in a while. So this trip would be a mix of sightseeing and catching up. I also still work part time, so I had to find a gap in my schedule. Mid April looked perfect. Spring should be arriving on the island, and I'd have 3 weeks free. So I started where I always do, on YouTube. Watching travel videos is a great way to get the feel for a place, what to see, and how to get around. Then I checked the probable weather for April. Looks like it should be mild, but I'll pack a rain jacket. This is the West Coast after all. Coordinating with friends and family took some planning as well. I had people I wanted to visit on both ends of Vancouver Island, so I started by reaching out to see when they'd be available. As it turned out, my brother and his wife were planning to visit my niece around the same time, which was a lucky coincidence. But it also meant I had to juggle schedules to make sure that I could see everyone. It felt like working out a big Sudoku puzzle with emails going back and forth to line up dates and locations. But after a bit of back and forth, I finally landed on an itinerary that fit everything together, giving me time to explore on my own while making sure that I could catch up with friends and family along the way. Next, I mapped out my prospective route: fly to Victoria, spend a few days exploring, drive up the east coast of Vancouver Island to Comox, stopping in Nanaimo along the way, visit with friends and family along the route. And then, since I'd be in Western Canada anyway, I figured, why not take a side trip to Banff on the way home? I hadn't been there since I was about 16, and I'd love to go and see the mountains once again. Booking my flights was next. I needed to get from Toronto to Vancouver Island, then from Vancouver Island to Calgary for Banff, and finally home again. I compared various flights and airlines and found that Air Canada had the best price and a direct flight to Victoria, which was appealing. I had enough Aeroplan points to cover a large part of it. I also booked the least expensive fare because I'm only bringing carry-on luggage. If you have an Aeroplan Visa Infinite card, you can get free checked bags on Air Canada flights. It's a good perk now that airlines charge for checked luggage. But for the last few years, I've been doing carry-on exclusively. If you're finding this useful, shoot me a like or consider subscribing. I'll no doubt be sharing updates as I make this trip, and perhaps some more senior solo travel tips as well. I like to mix accommodations when I travel, sometimes staying with friends, sometimes booking Airbnbs, and occasionally a hotel when it makes sense. In Sooke, Nanaimo, and Comox, I found Airbnbs that were well located and reasonably priced. One Airbnb in Nanaimo has a washer and dryer, which is great when you're traveling light. I can freshen up my clothes halfway through the trip. In Calgary, I booked a hotel near the airport with a free shuttle. That saves hassle and the cost of a taxi. If you're booking Airbnbs, check for ones that have a washer at least sometime during the middle part of your trip. It can really save you from overpacking. At first, I planned to rent a car in Calgary for 2 days and then drive back and forth to Banff and Lake Louise. But then I checked Viator and TripAdvisor and I found an 8-hour guided tour for about $100. It goes from Calgary to Banff to Lake Louise with several stops along the way. That seemed like a great deal. I wouldn't have to worry about parking, navigation, or missing key spots. So for now, I'll take the guided tour on day one, then I'll leave day two open. In late April in the mountains, I learned that the weather can be unpredictable, and I really don't relish driving through unfamiliar mountain roads in bad weather. So for day two, I'll possibly rent a car and go back to some of those spots that I want to explore further. Or there's a guided day trip to Drumheller, which isn't far away, to explore dinosaur bones. And that sounds good too. Sometimes a guided tour is more convenient than driving yourself, especially if it covers parking fees and takes the stress out of navigating unfamiliar roads. You can learn more about the places that you're visiting, and there are often interesting people to talk with along the way. So, with my flights, accommodations, and transportation booked, I let my friends and family know when I'll be in their area. Now, everything's set. I just need to pack. So, that's how I have planned this upcoming trip. It took a bit of coordination, like a puzzle with flights, accommodation, and visits to fit together. But now I have a solid plan that gives me both structure and flexibility. I always like knowing that plans are in place before I start out on a trip. It makes the vacation so much more enjoyable and relaxed. So remember, time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. Enjoy planning your next solo travel adventure. See you next time.